My name is Nora James. I am 32 years old, and I have learned that the truth is rarely a sudden explosion. More often, it is a slow-moving glacier carving through the bedrock of our lives, invisible until the landscape has already been permanently altered. Last Sunday, my mother-in-law slid a thick cream-colored parchment envelope across the mahogany dining table, looked at my husband with a gaze forged in absolute certainty, and said, "I think you need to see this, Julian, for the sake of this family." She had secretly DNA tested our 3-year-old daughter. She expected the results to shatter my marriage, to expose me as a fraud, and to reclaim the total dominion she believed she held over her son's life. What she did not expect, what none of them expected, was that those same results would detonate her own carefully constructed reality, reducing a 36-year-old lie to ash. But here is what none of them knew. Not my husband, not his sister, not even his father. I had found out about the test 2 weeks before that fateful dinner, and what I did with those 14 days of silent, methodical preparation changed the trajectory of our family forever. Before I take you back to the beginning, to the moment the foundation was first cracked, I want you to understand that I am not a woman who acts on impulse. I am a woman who observes. I document. I wait for the structural integrity of a lie to fail under its own weight. Now, let me take you back 7 years to the autumn afternoon I first met Evelyn Vance. I was 25, and Julian and I had been dating for 4 months. He brought me to his parents' sprawling historic estate in Newport, Rhode Island, on a crisp Saturday in October. The house was a masterpiece of Gilded Age architecture, all sweeping staircases, dark wood paneling, and ocean views that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. When Evelyn opened the heavy oak front door, she did not greet me with the warmth of a mother welcoming a future daughter. She received me like a hostile witness being sworn in for a deposition. She did not offer a hug. She extended a hand, her grip firm, her eyes already scanning me from my scuffed ankle boots to the modest wool coat I had thrifted in Providence. The first 30 minutes were a masterclass in superficial civility. We sat in the sunroom, drinking Earl Grey tea from porcelain cups so thin they were practically translucent. Julian's father, Arthur, a retired structural engineer with hands that looked like they had carved the very wood of the house, told a mildly amusing story about restoring the carriage house. It was normal enough. But then Evelyn steered the conversation the way a chess master steers a pawn. Quietly, with absolute, terrifying purpose. "So, Nora," she began, her voice smooth and devoid of any real inflection, "where did you grow up? What is the history of your family?" I told her about my childhood in a modest, drafty apartment in Providence, about my mother, Elena, who had worked double shifts as a neonatal nurse to keep the heat on during the brutal New England winters. "And your father?" Evelyn asked, her gaze locking onto mine. I set my teacup down, the porcelain clicking softly against the saucer. "He left when I was 6, I said, keeping my voice steady. Evelyn nodded slowly. She reached up with her right hand and touched the heavy antique gold signet ring she wore on her index finger. It was a small, practiced gesture, twisting the heavy gold band once between her thumb and forefinger. I would see that gesture 1,000 times over the next 7 years. It was her tell, the physical manifestation of her calculating mind. "That must have been difficult," she said. She said it the way people say interesting when they actually mean noted and filed away for future leverage. Later, in the car as we drove back to our tiny rented apartment in the city, Julian squeezed my hand. "She liked you," he said, entirely oblivious. "Did she?" I asked, watching the coastal pines blur past. He laughed, a bright, easy sound I did not. What I noticed that night, and what I filed away in the meticulous archives of my mind without fully understanding its implications yet, was how much Evelyn needed to know the provenance of everything, not just me, everything. She asked Julian about the wine we had brought. Where was it sourced? Who was the vintner? She inspected the label before she even considered pouring it. She was a woman who tracked origins, who believed that if you could not trace a thing back to its purest, most acceptable root, it was inherently flawed. I did not know then that this obsessive need for pedigree would one day be weaponized against my daughter, but I remember thinking as I looked at her profile in the rearview mirror, she is someone who keeps score, and she never forgives a deficit. Julian and I got married the following June. It was a small, intimate ceremony on the rocky coast of Maine. Just 40 guests, the sound of the Atlantic crashing against the cliffs as our only accompaniment. My mother flew in from Providence wearing her best Sunday dress, her eyes shining with pride. Evelyn wore a tailored cream suit, which my maid of honor later whispered was a deliberate power move, an attempt to visually overshadow the bride. I did not care. I was marrying a good man. Julian was an architect, a man who saw the world in terms of load-bearing walls and harmonious proportions. He was kind, steady, and entirely unprepared for the psychological warfare his mother waged. The first year of our marriage was quiet in the way new marriages often are, a fragile bubble of intimacy. We rented a charming, slightly dilapidated Victorian in Providence, 40 minutes south of Evelyn and Arthur's Newport estate. It was close enough for obligatory holiday visits, but far enough to allow for breathing room. Except Evelyn did not believe in breathing room. She operated under the delusion that proximity equated to ownership. She showed up unannounced, Tuesdays mostly, sometimes Thursdays. She would walk in through the side door of our kitchen. We had given her a key years ago for emergencies, a term she interpreted with terrifying elasticity. She would walk in and rearrange whatever was in reach. The spice rack, organized alphabetically by my standards, would be reorganized by color. The coat closet would be purged of items she deemed clutter. Once she completely overhauled my linen cabinet and left a handwritten note on heavy cream stationery. Towels by size and weave, Nora. It is much more efficient. I thanked her, swallowing the rising tide of my own indignation. Julian just sighed, rubbing his temples. That is just how she is, Nora. She needs order. It's her love language. But it wasn't love. It was colonization. Julian's younger sister, Chloe, visited on weekends. She was 24 then, still living in the Newport estate, still orbiting her mother like a moon trapped in a decaying orbit. Chloe was a social media influencer, a woman whose entire personality was curated for digital consumption. Every visit ended the same way. Chloe would leave, and by that evening, Evelyn would call Julian with a detailed, surgical commentary about our house, our meals, our financial decisions, our plans. I did not say anything at first. I was new to the family, still learning the unspoken rules of the Vance ecosystem, still trying to find the load-bearing walls of their dynamics so I wouldn't trigger a collapse. One night at Thanksgiving, as we sat around a table groaning under the weight of a roasted turkey and silver serving dishes, Evelyn raised her crystal glass. "To Julian," she said, her voice ringing clear across the room. She looked around the table at Arthur, Chloe, her sister Beatrice, and Julian's uncle Richard. Then her eyes landed on me for exactly 1 second. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Julian could have had anyone," she said, the words dripping with a subtle, venomous implication. "Anyone." The table laughed, a nervous, compliant sound. I smiled, a tight, practiced expression. Somewhere deep in my chest, a small, precise instrument made its first measurement of the hostility in the room. Maya was born on a rainy Wednesday in March, 2 years into our marriage. She weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and she came into the world screaming, which the exhausted nurse assured me was a fantastic sign. But it was her appearance that silenced the room. Her hair was not the dark raven black that characterized the Vance lineage. It was not the deep, rich brown of my own hair. It was a striking, almost translucent platinum blonde, and her eyes, when they finally opened, were a pale, piercing gray. Evelyn held her in the hospital room, staring down at the bundle with an expression I could not quite decipher. "She has Julian's nose," she said finally. There was warmth in it, or at least the simulation of it. For a fleeting moment, I thought, maybe this is the thing that bridges the gap. Maybe a grandchild will soften her. That moment lasted exactly 6 months. At 6 months, Maya's hair began to change. Not all at once, but strand by strand, like the first frost settling on autumn leaves. The soft baby blonde darkened slightly, then lightened again, settling into a head of thick, striking, silvery white curls that caught the light like spun glass. I thought it was breathtaking. My mother had the same striking hair, a genetic quirk from her own grandmother. The genetics were not a mystery to me. It was a simple recessive trait, a beautiful anomaly. But Evelyn did not see genetics. She saw a discrepancy. She saw a flaw in the blueprint. "Interesting," she said at Maya's first birthday party, holding one of the silvery curls between her finger the way a detective holds a piece of trace evidence. White hair, and those gray eyes. She looked at Julian, looked at me, looked back at Julian. "Where does that come from, Nora?" I explained, keeping my voice light. "Recessive gene, my maternal line. It skips generations sometimes." Evelyn smiled. It was not a real smile. It was the tightening of lips, the slight crinkle of eyes that did not reach them. She twisted her gold signet ring. Interesting. Because that coloring does not run in the Vance family. We are a dark-haired people, Nora." She said it lightly, the way you might mention a hairline fracture in a foundation. Not alarming, just factual. Just something that should probably be investigated before the whole structure came down. Nobody at the party responded. The guests, mostly Julian's colleagues and extended family, murmured their agreement and turned back to their cake. But I heard it, and I knew, with the absolute certainty of someone who has spent her life reading the micro-expressions of children who cannot speak, that she had been thinking about this for a long time. She had been waiting for this. Over the next year, the atmosphere shifted. It was not dramatic. Nothing Evelyn did was ever dramatic at first. She was methodical. She planted seeds of doubt the way someone salts a road before an ice storm. Thin, deliberate, invisible layers that you do not feel until you lose your footing and crash. The comments about Maya's hair and eyes became routine. Not every visit, but often enough to erode my sanity. "She is so unique looking, almost alien. No one on our side has that coloring. Are you sure about your family history, Nora? Maybe you should look into your mother's past. There are always secrets, aren't there?" I started keeping count. I bought a small leather-bound notebook and kept it in my bedside drawer. 14 comments in 6 months. I wrote the dates, the exact quotes, the context. Professional habit. In my work as a pediatric physical therapist, I documented everything. Behavioral patterns, motor milestones, sensory triggers, the exact angle of a joint. Documentation was how I made sense of a chaotic world. It was how I proved that progress was happening, even when it was invisible. Chloe amplified the campaign from her own digital channels. She posted a photo of Maya on Instagram. Maya was standing in Evelyn's manicured Newport garden, her white curls glowing in the sun, her gray eyes wide. The caption read, "She is so unique looking. Wonder where she gets it from. #family, #jeans, #mystery. 1,400 likes." I showed Julian. He shrugged, not looking up from his blueprints. Chloe is just being Chloe. She needs engagement for her brand. The extended family began to look at me differently. The silence was the loudest part. Richard, Julian's uncle, avoided eye contact at a summer barbecue. Clara, a cousin who had always been warm, stopped texting. And Beatrice, Evelyn's older sister, started watching me the way you watch a suspect who is about to confess. None of this was said out loud. That was the point. Evelyn was not building a case with shouted accusations. She was building one with silence. The kind of silence that fills a room with suspicion the way smoke fills a house before anyone sees the flames. I felt it. I just could not prove it yet. The breaking point, the moment the invisible became visible, happened on a Tuesday in April. Julian had a major site meeting in Boston. I had a late shift at the hospital. A 7-year-old boy named Leo, who had suffered a severe spinal cord injury in a car accident, needed extra session time, and I could not say no to his tearful mother. Evelyn offered to watch Maya. "I want to spend time with my granddaughter," she had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I dropped Maya off at 10 in the morning. I packed her bag meticulously. Snacks, diapers, a change of clothes, her favorite stuffed rabbit, and the specific insulated blue sippy cup she had been using since she was 18 months old. When I picked Maya up at 6, the cup was gone. "Oh, that old thing?" Evelyn said, not meeting my eyes as she wiped down the already spotless kitchen island. "I threw it out. It looked worn, unsightly." It was not worn. I had bought it 3 weeks earlier. I did not push it. I thanked her, my voice tight. I loaded Maya into her car seat, drove home in silence. But something else caught my eye that afternoon. When I walked through Evelyn's kitchen to grab Maya's jacket from the counter, I saw a small, clear plastic evidence bag on the island, the kind you use for forensic collection. Evelyn moved with startling speed. She snatched it up and tucked it into a drawer before I could read the label. "Just organizing," she said, her voice a fraction too high. And on her desk in the hallway, partially visible behind a stack of architectural magazines, I saw a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed, bearing the logo of a private diagnostic lab I had never heard of. I did not connect any of it that night. The missing cup, the evidence bag, the envelope. They were puzzle pieces without a picture. I went home, bathed Maya, read her a story, and fell into an exhausted sleep. But my brain, the part of me trained to notice patterns in children who could not tell me what was wrong, that part of me was already working, already connecting the dots. At work, I was someone else. Not a different person, but a fuller, more authoritative version of the same one. In Evelyn's world, I was quiet, careful, always adjusting, always deflecting. At the hospital, I was calm because I chose to be. There is a profound difference between passive submission and active restraint. My patients that spring included Leo, the boy with the spinal injury. Getting him to hold a physical therapy band was a project measured in millimeters and months. I sat with him 3 times a week, guiding his fingers, adjusting his grip, waiting. Some sessions he cried in frustration. Some sessions he laughed at my silly voices. Most sessions he just stared at the band like it was a mountain he was not sure he could climb. One Thursday he managed to grip it and pull it a single inch. His mother wept in the hallway. I cried in the supply closet after my shift. My supervisor, Dr. Aras, pulled me aside the following week. Nora, you are the calmest person in a crisis I have ever met. You don't react. You observe. You plan. I made $72,000 a year. Not rich, not struggling. Enough to cover my student loans, contribute to Maya's education fund, and pay for the occasional dinner Julian and I still managed to have alone. I mention this because later, when Evelyn tried to frame me as a gold digger who had trapped her son for security, it mattered that I had built my own life, my own worth, before he was in it. I paid my way through grad school. I earned my license. I chose this work because holding a child's hand while they learn to do something the world told them they could not do is the closest thing I know to a religious experience. Evelyn never asked about my work. Not once in 7 years. Easter was the first time Evelyn said it in front of everyone, stripping away the subtlety. We were at the Newport estate. Full table. Arthur, Chloe, Beatrice, Richard, Clara. Maya had just run into the dining room in a yellow sundress, her white curls bouncing, her gray eyes bright. Clara said, "Oh my God, she is absolutely adorable." Evelyn set her wine glass down. The crystal clinked against the table. "She really does not look like any Vance I have ever seen," she said. She paused. She let the silence do its work. She let it stretch until it was uncomfortable. "Not one," she added. Chloe, right on cue, chimed in. "Mom is right. I looked at the old family photo albums. No white hair, no gray eyes." I felt the table turn, not dramatically. No one gasped, but the air changed, the way air changes pressure before a violent storm. Arthur cleared his throat, staring intently at his plate. Beatrice studied her asparagus. I looked at Julian. He was looking at his wine glass, his jaw tight. He said nothing. The dinner continued. Maya ate her mashed potatoes, oblivious to the fact that she was on trial. Evelyn served dessert. Chloe complimented the tart. The wound was delivered and papered over in the same breath. In the car on the way home, the silence was deafening. Finally, I said, "If your mother says that one more time in front of your family, implying what she is implying, I will respond. I will not be silent anymore." Julian's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "She will not. I will talk to her." "When?" "Soon. That is what you said after Thanksgiving. That is what you said after Christmas." He did not answer. We drove the rest of the way in silence. Maya slept in the back, her white curls pressed against the fabric of her car seat. He never talked to her. I knew he would not. Julian avoided conflict the way some people avoid black ice, not because they were afraid, but because they had learned early that the fastest route was also the one with the most collisions. But I was done waiting for him to merge. I was done being the shock absorber for his family's dysfunction. 3 weeks after Easter, my phone rang at work. I was between patients, sitting in the therapy room, cleaning resistance bands. The number was local, but the area code was from Boston. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Mrs. Vance, this is Sarah from Helix Gen Diagnostics. I am calling to confirm that we have received a buccal swab sample for analysis under your daughter's name, Maya Vance, age 3. I set the resistance band down. The room suddenly felt very cold. I did not submit a sample. The submission was made under the name Evelyn Vance. She listed herself as the child's grandmother and the legal guardian for the purpose of this test. However, our policy, in accordance with state law, requires the express, written consent of a biological parent for testing on a minor. I asked her to repeat that. She did, her voice professional, detached. "We have placed the test on hold pending your authorization. Would you like to proceed or cancel?" "Cancel," I said. My voice did not shake. It never does when it matters. It is a trait I inherited from my mother, who delivered devastating news to parents about their children's health for 30 years and never once let her voice crack. "Cancel the test. Flag my daughter's profile. No one submits anything under her name without my written, notarized consent. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mrs. Vance, it has been canceled." My hands were shaking when I hung up, but my mind was crystal clear. I sat in the therapy room for 4 minutes. I stared at the anatomical chart of the human nervous system on the wall. I let the complex web of nerves ground me. Then I picked up my phone and called a family attorney. Let me pause here, because what I did in the 14 days between that phone call and that Sunday dinner is the reason I am standing where I am today. I did not act out of anger. I acted out of a cold, calculated need to protect my child. I called a lawyer that same afternoon. Her name was Victoria Sterling. She practiced family law out of a sleek, glass-walled office in Boston. She had 14 years of experience and a reputation for being ruthless, direct, and entirely unimpressed by old money. I told her everything: the comments, the missing sippy cup, the evidence bag, the envelope, the phone call from Helix Jen. She listened without interrupting, which in my line of work is the hallmark of someone who is actually paying attention. When I finished, she leaned back in her leather chair, steepling her fingers. Under Massachusetts and Rhode Island law, a grandparent cannot authorize genetic testing on a minor child without the express written consent of a parent or legal guardian. Full stop. It is a violation of your daughter's privacy rights and potentially actionable in civil court for tortious interference and emotional distress. "So, what she did is illegal?" I asked. "It is a severe violation of protocol," Victoria corrected. "It may also violate the testing company's terms of service, which could expose them to liability." "Did she forge your consent on the submission form?" "I do not know. She must have. She used Maya's full name." Victoria made a note on her legal pad. "In the meantime, do not confront her. Do not tell your husband yet." I looked at her, surprised. "Why not?" "Because if you tell Julian, he will call his mother. She will cry, she will apologize, she will claim she was just curious and worried, and she will ask him to keep it in the family. The pattern will repeat. She will just find a different way to undermine you. If you want this to stop, really stop, you need to let her play her hand. You need to let her walk into the trap she has built for you, and then you need to spring it on her. I paid the consultation fee. It was the best money I have ever spent." Walking out of Victoria's office, I called Helix Jen back. I confirmed the cancellation and demanded a written record of the attempted submission, including the IP address and the name used. They emailed it to me within the hour. Then I drove to pick up Maya from daycare. She ran to me at the door, arms up, her white curls a halo of light. I held her tightly, burying my face in her neck, smelling the baby shampoo and graham crackers. "Nobody is taking anything from us," I whispered. That night, after Maya went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I searched genetic testing consent laws. The results confirmed what Victoria had told me. Parental consent was absolute. A grandparent had no legal standing. But I knew Evelyn. She was not just going to rely on a clinical lab that actually followed the law. I searched for at-home consumer DNA test kits. This was where it got more complicated. Clinical labs like HelixGen had strict consent protocols, But consumer platforms, the ones that advertised ancestry and family connections, had consent checkboxes that were incredibly easy to bypass. A simple click on "I am the parent or legal guardian" and a credit card number. Done. Evelyn had used HelixGen for what I assumed was a direct paternity test, but had she also used a consumer platform to dig deeper? I opened Evelyn's Facebook page. She rarely posted, but Chloe tagged her in everything. I scrolled back through the tags. In February, Chloe had shared an article titled, "What Your DNA Says About Your Family: The Surprising Connections That At-Home Tests Reveal." Evelyn had commented, "Very interesting. We must try this." I took a screenshot, saved it to a folder on my desktop labeled Documentation, Professional Habit. Then I opened my bedside notebook, the one where I had been logging Evelyn's comments about Maya's hair. 14 entries in 6 months. I added a 15th, April 14th. HelixGen confirmed sample submitted under Evelyn Vance's name without parental consent. Consumer platform suspected. I closed the notebook. I looked at the bedroom door. Julian was already asleep, his breathing deep and even. I wanted to wake him. I wanted to shake him and show him everything, to force him to see the woman who raised him. But Victoria's words kept circling in my mind. Let her play her hand. So I turned off the lamp, and I waited. The hardest part was not the waiting. It was carrying the knowledge alone, the weight of the impending explosion. For the next 3 days, I moved through my life as if nothing had changed. I went to work. I treated patients. I came home and cooked dinner and gave Maya her bath and read her the same book about a star that fell in love with the ocean. Julian noticed nothing. He was managing 3 major architectural projects that month. He came home tired. He kissed Maya on the forehead. He kissed me on the mouth. He fell asleep by 9:30. One night, Maya crawled between us. She does that. 2 in the morning, bare feet padding down the hall, climbing in like a small negotiator. She curled into Julian's side. Her white curls fanned across the pillow. I watched them in the glow of the nightlight. My husband and my daughter, his strong jaw, her delicate features. I thought about my mother. She had raised me on a nurse's salary after my father walked out. No family money, no backup plan. She did it by documenting everything. Insurance claims, school forms, budgets scratched on the backs of envelopes. She taught me that information is not power. Knowing exactly when to deploy it is. At work, I helped a 6-year-old girl practice gripping a spoon. She dropped it 11 times. On the 12th, she held it long enough to bring it to her mouth. She looked at me and smiled, a gap-toothed triumph. "Good," I said, again. Some things cannot be rushed. You prepare, you position, you wait for the moment when the grip holds. I was not ready yet, but I was getting close. On day 5, I got lucky. I drove to the Newport estate to pick up a pair of Maya's shoes she had left there the previous weekend. Evelyn was out. "Hair appointment," Chloe said when she opened the door. Chloe was in the living room, phone propped against a stack of design books, FaceTiming someone. I walked past her toward the mudroom. The house was quiet except for Chloe's voice, which carried the way it always did, louder than necessary. "Mom has the results. She is doing it at Sunday dinner, in front of everyone, the whole family." I stopped. My hand was on Maya's left shoe. "She has been planning it for weeks," Chloe continued, laughing. "She says once Julian sees the proof, he will not be able to ignore it. He will have to kick her out." The voice on the other end said something I could not hear. Chloe laughed again. "I know, right? It is going to be insane. Finally, Some drama. I picked up the shoes, walked back through the living room. Chloe saw me, killed the call fast, her face flushing. "Oh, hey, just chatting with a friend." I smiled, a cold, hard expression. "No worries. Just grabbing Maya's shoes." "Cool. Tell Julian I said hi." "Will do." I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, set the shoes on the passenger seat, placed both hands on the steering wheel, and pressed until my knuckles turned white. Now I knew 3 things. When? Sunday. Where? The dining room table. Who would be watching? Everyone. Evelyn had built a stage. She had cast the audience. She had rehearsed the lines. And she believed, fully, absolutely believed, that the results would say what she wanted them to say. I started the car. I was not going to stop her. I was going to let her light the match. The fire would find its own way back to her. On day 7, I found the ghost. Not intentionally. Not at first. I was trying to understand how Evelyn's DNA submission worked on the consumer platform. I created my own account on the same service, submitted my own sample, and spent an evening reading about how familial matching algorithms function. Here's what I learned. When you submit DNA to one of these platforms, the system does not just test paternity. It scans the entire database for genetic relatives. Siblings, cousins, second cousins. Anyone who shares enough markers with your sample gets flagged. Evelyn had submitted Maya's DNA. That meant Maya's profile was now cross-referenced with every other profile in the system. I logged into the account Evelyn had created. She had used an email I found through a password reset trick Chloe had once mentioned in passing, complaining about her mother's terrible cybersecurity. The password was Maya's birthday. Of course it was. Evelyn was obsessed with the child she was trying to destroy. And there, under potential relatives on Maya's profile, was a name I had never seen. Elias Thorne, age 36, Seattle, Washington, relationship estimate, half uncle or equivalent. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. Half uncle meant one thing. Elias shared a biological parent with either Julian or with me. Since I was not biologically connected to the platform's test, only Maya was, the match had to be on Julian's side, which meant either Arthur had a secret son or Evelyn did. I took a screenshot, saved it to the documentation folder, and emailed it to Victoria. The next morning, Victoria called. If this match is accurate, it means someone in the Vance bloodline has a biological connection to this man that they have not disclosed. Or that Evelyn has a biological connection, I said. She submitted the test. Her DNA isn't in there, but she controls the account. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then we need to find out who Elias Thorne is. Elias Thorne, born June 1990, Seattle, Washington, adopted at birth through a private agency in Providence, Rhode Island. It took me 2 evenings of deep dive internet sleuthing to find this. The DNA platform had limited public information, but Elias had opted into the open to contact feature. His profile said, adopted, looking for biological family, open to conversation. I did not contact him. That was not my right. But I did the math. Born in 1990. Evelyn was 25. She and Arthur married in 1992 when she was 27. Julian was born in 1992 as well. Evelyn had a child 2 years before she married Arthur. She gave that child up for adoption, and she never told anyone, except, possibly, the one person who had been sitting at every family dinner, watching me with careful, knowing eyes. Aunt Beatrice. Because when I looked at Elias's DNA match report more carefully, I noticed something. The platform listed shared matches other profiles that both Elias and Maya connected to. One of them was tagged Margaret B., possible aunt or half-aunt. Beatrice's middle name was Beatrice. Margaret Beatrice. Beatrice knew. She had known for 36 years. I sat at my kitchen table and thought about Evelyn. Not with anger, not yet. I thought about a 25-year-old woman, unmarried, probably terrified, making a decision that would follow her for the rest of her life. I understood that kind of fear. I had grown up watching my mother make impossible choices, but understanding a choice and forgiving the lie that follows it are not the same thing. Evelyn had not just given up a child. She had buried the truth so deep that she convinced herself the only threat to her family's pristine bloodline was me. She was afraid of being found out, and she turned that fear into a weapon aimed at my daughter. Thursday, Evelyn called. Big family dinner this Sunday. I want everyone there. I told Arthur to invite Richard. Her voice was bright. Too bright, the kind of brightness that comes from rehearsal. We will be there, I said. Friday, I printed the screenshots. I organized my documentation folder. Dates, events, evidence, lab confirmation, platform login records. The familial match report for Elias Thorne. I backed everything up to my cloud drive and emailed copies to Victoria. If she does it, Victoria said over the phone, if she presents the test publicly, that strengthens your position in any civil action. You have witnesses to her admission of unauthorized testing. I know. Are you sure you want to go through with this? You could confront her privately and end it before Sunday. I am sure. Saturday night, I gave Maya her bath. She sat in the tub splashing, her white curls slicked wet and dark against her neck. I shampooed her hair gently, working the lather through the tangles. Mommy, why does Grandma Evelyn always pull my hair? I paused. My 3-year-old was already noticing. Because your hair is very special, baby. It is magic hair. Is it? The most magic. I dried her, dressed her in pajamas, read her the star book. She fell asleep holding my thumb. Julian came upstairs. Mom seems really excited about Sunday. Wonder what is up? I looked at him, my husband. Kind face, tired eyes, a good man who had spent his entire life believing his mother was a saint. I guess we will find out, I said. I lay in bed that night and did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling and ran through every scenario. In every version, the truth came out. The only variable was how much it would cost. Sunday morning, I dressed carefully. An ivory cashmere sweater, soft, not sharp. Dark jeans. The small gold necklace Julian gave me on our first anniversary. No war paint. No armor. Just me. Maya wore a blue dress with white flowers. She spun twice in the hallway mirror before I caught her. Julian loaded the car. 40 minutes north, classic rock on the radio. Maya fell asleep before we hit the highway. I watched Julian's hands on the steering wheel. Strong hands. Hands that designed buildings, structures designed to hold weight, to withstand storms. And I thought, today those hands would either hold mine or let go. We pulled into Evelyn's driveway at 4:15. 3 cars already there. Arthur's truck, Chloe's sedan, a silver Lexus I recognized as Beatrice's. Full house. Evelyn met us at the door. She hugged Julian, long, firm, the kind of hug mothers give when they are about to do something they believe is righteous. She nodded at me, brief, efficient. Put Maya down upstairs, she said. She can nap in the guest room. I carried Maya up, laid her on the bed, pulled a blanket over her legs. Her white curls fanned across the white pillow like a halo. Back downstairs, the family was assembled. Arthur in his usual chair by the window, Richard beside him, Chloe on the couch, phone in hand, leg bouncing, Clara, setting out napkins, Beatrice standing by the china cabinet, arms crossed, mouth tight, and on the hallway table, right where I had seen it 2 weeks ago, the cream-colored envelope, thick, sealed, waiting. Evelyn caught me looking at it. She smiled. The signet ring smile. "Dinner first?" she said. The roast was good. I will give Evelyn that. She had always been an excellent cook. Arthur told a story about a fishing trip in Maine. Richard laughed. Clara complimented the gravy. Normal sounds. Normal dinner. But I was watching the currents beneath the surface. Chloe checked her phone every 30 seconds. Not texting. Just checking the time. She was on a clock. Beatrice held her fork the way some people hold the railing on a bridge. Tight grip. Eyes straight ahead. She ate almost nothing. Evelyn sat at the head of the table. She smiled at everyone. She asked about Richard's new boat. She refilled Arthur's water. She was performing calm the way an actress performs grief. Technically perfect. Emotionally hollow. 20 minutes in, the small talk had run its course. Arthur was mid-sentence about a carburetor when Evelyn stood up. She smoothed her blouse, tucked a strand of dyed brown hair behind her ear, cleared her throat. "Before dessert," she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room, "there is something I want to share with the family." The table went quiet. Arthur stopped talking. Richard set his fork down. Clara looked at Chloe. Chloe looked at her plate. Beatrice closed her eyes. Just for a second, just long enough for me to notice. Evelyn walked to the hallway, returned with the envelope. She held it the way a prosecutor holds an exhibit, at chest level, label facing out. What happened in the next 3 minutes changed everything, not just for me, for every person at that table. Evelyn set the envelope on the table, slid it toward Julian. "Open it." Julian looked at the envelope, then at his mother. "What is this?" Evelyn placed her hands flat on the table. She had rehearsed this. I could tell because her breathing was measured, the same cadence she probably used when delivering disciplinary news at the country club where she spent her days. "This is a DNA test," she said, "for Maya." The room contracted. I could feel it. The walls pulling inward, the air thinning. Arthur frowned. "Evelyn, what the hell did you do?" Evelyn did not look at him. She looked at me. "No offense, dear, but this family deserves the truth." "Mom," Julian's voice was low, dangerous. "What truth?" "I had Maya tested, privately, because I love this family, because that child," she pointed toward the ceiling, toward the room where our daughter slept, "does not look like a Vance." Chloe leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Beatrice stared at her plate. Evelyn's voice rose half a register. She was reaching the part she had practiced most. "I have said it before. I will say it again. White hair and gray eyes do not run in the Vance family. And I think Julian has a right to know whether that child is really his." The sentence landed on the table like a brick through glass. Richard looked at his hands. Clara's mouth opened, then closed. Arthur gripped the armrest of his chair. Julian stared at the envelope. His hands were steady, but his jaw was working, the way it does when he is deciding between silence and something irreversible. "Open it," Evelyn said again. She was smiling. She believed, truly, deeply believed, that the contents of that envelope would prove her right. She was wrong. Julian picked up the envelope, broke the seal, pulled out a stack of pages, 5 or 6 sheets, printed on Helix Gen letterhead. He read the first page in silence. 15 seconds passed, maybe 20. long enough for Evelyn to shift her weight from one foot to the other. Long enough for Chloe to stop breathing. Julian looked up. He looked at Evelyn. "She is mine." Evelyn blinked. "What?" "Probability of paternity, 99.99%. He held up the page. "Maya is my daughter." The smile on Evelyn's face did not fall. It fractured, like ice on a windshield, still in place, but no longer holding. "That cannot be right. Let me see." She reached for the papers. Julian pulled them back. "No, you have done enough." "Julian, maybe the lab made an error," Chloe stammered. Julian turned to her. "Shut up, Chloe." Chloe recoiled like she had been slapped. In 30 years, Julian had never spoken to her like that. The room understood. Something had shifted in him. A door that had been propped open his entire life had just closed. Evelyn's hand went to her gold signet ring, twisting it. The gesture I had seen at our first dinner together, at Thanksgiving, at Easter, at every moment when Evelyn's certainty met resistance. "There must be a mistake," she said. Her voice was smaller now. "The hair, the eyes, it does not make sense." Julian set the papers down. He looked at me for the first time since Evelyn had stood up. I had been sitting at the far end of the table, still, quiet, hands folded in my lap, watching. And now it was my turn to speak. "The results are correct, Evelyn." My voice was level. The same voice I use when a parent asks me if their child will ever walk normally. Calm, clear, and carrying more weight than volume. "I know, because I called the lab 2 weeks ago when they contacted me to verify parental consent. Consent that you never obtained." The room shifted. Not a sound. A vibration. The kind you feel in the floor before a train arrives. Arthur leaned forward. "You tested our granddaughter without their permission?" Evelyn's chin lifted. "I was protecting this family." "Under state law," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the sudden silence. "A grandparent cannot authorize genetic testing of a minor without written parental consent. Your attorney can explain the specifics if you would like. Mine already has." I said this the way I document a patient's progress notes. Factual, chronological, without adjectives. Evelyn's face cycled through 3 colors in as many seconds. Pink to red to white. Her hand dropped from her ring. "But the lab should not have. The lab followed protocol. You did not." Silence. Chloe pressed her lips together. Richard looked at Arthur. Arthur looked at Evelyn with an expression I had never seen him wear. Not anger, not disappointment. Something worse. The look of a man realizing he does not know the person sitting across from him. I let the silence hold. 1 second, 2, 3. Then I said, "But that is not the most interesting thing in those results." Every head turned. Julian looked at me. "What do you mean?" "Keep reading," I said, "page 4. He flipped past the paternity confirmation, past the methodology page, past the consent disclosure, and he reached the familial match report. Julian read aloud, slowly, the way you read something you do not yet understand. Potential familial match. Elias Thorne, age 36, Seattle, Washington, relationship estimate, half-uncle to Maya Vance. He stopped, looked at the page again, looked at me, looked at Evelyn. Half-uncle, he said like he was translating from another language. That would mean he is either my half-brother or Nora's half-brother. He is not mine, I said. Julian turned to Evelyn. Mom, who is Elias? Evelyn's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. Her signet ring, the one she had been touching all night, hung motionless. Even the nervous gesture had abandoned her. I do not, I do not know what that. Aunt Beatrice's fork hit the plate. She stood up. Evelyn, do not. 2 words, and the room understood everything. Richard, Beatrice, sit down, Arthur said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the absolute authority of a man who had built skyscrapers. Arthur stood slowly. His chair scraped across the hardwood, a sound that cut through the silence like a blade dragged across a stone. Evelyn, answer the question. Evelyn's eyes filled. She looked at Beatrice. Beatrice shook her head, a small, desperate no. It was before you, Evelyn said, her voice cracked. Not the practiced crack of a woman performing vulnerability. A real crack. The kind that comes from a wall bearing weight for 36 years finally giving way. Before your father, I was 25. I was not ready. You had a child, Julian said. His voice was flat, dead. I was young. I was so scared. You had a child, and you never told me. Julian stood now, too. You never told Dad. Arthur's hand found the back of his chair. He held it the way you hold something when the ground is no longer steady. 36 years. Arthur's voice was quiet. Electrician's hands flat on the table. We have been married 34. Evelyn. Arthur, please. It was before us. I was so ashamed. You told Beatrice. He looked at Beatrice, who was still standing, one hand on the china cabinet. But not me. Arthur, she was scared, Beatrice whispered. Were you scared for 36 years, Evelyn? Arthur asked. The question landed and stayed. Nobody moved. Evelyn cried. Real tears this time. Not the performative kind she deployed when Julian forgot to call on Sundays. These were the tears of a woman watching a foundation she had built with silence crumble under the weight of her own scheme. For one moment, one small, strange moment, I saw her. Not the Evelyn who had spent 7 years questioning my daughter's DNA, but the 25-year-old girl who sat in a hospital in Providence and signed papers and walked away from a baby she was not allowed to keep. I understood that girl. My heart ached for her. Then Evelyn wiped her eyes, straightened her back, and said, This is Nora's fault. She brought this up to humiliate me. The moment of sympathy evaporated like steam off a window. Gone. Julian stepped forward. Mom, Nora did not bring up anything. You ordered the DNA test. You planned this dinner. You slid that envelope across the table. He picked up the pages, held them toward her. I think you need to see this, Julian, for the sake of this family. Is that not what you said? Well, we saw it. Evelyn sat down, not in her chair. She missed it slightly and caught the edge. Beatrice reached for her. Evelyn pushed her hand away. Chloe was crying. Mascara tracked down both cheeks. She looked less like a 29-year-old influencer and more like a child who had just discovered the rules of her world were not what she thought. I did not know about Elias, she sobbed. Mom, you told me Maya was not Julian's. You said you had proof. Evelyn, she is not, Julian cut in. The white hair, Evelyn stammered, grasping at straws. Julian pulled out his phone, swiped through his photos, found what he was looking for, and held it up for the table to see. A photograph. Old. Taken in the early 1980s, judging by the clothes. A young woman standing in a garden, squinting into the sun. She had striking, almost white platinum blonde hair. I found this in the attic last year, Julian said. In a box of old photos you told me were Aunt Beatrice's. It is you, Mom. Age 19 or 20. Richard leaned in. Evelyn, is that you? Your hair was white. Evelyn's hand, the one that always found her signet ring, hung at her side. She reached up slowly, unclipped the heavy gold ring, set it on the table. The metal clicked against the wood. "I started dyeing it at 19, she whispered. "I always hated it. It made me stand out. It made me look like my mother, who I was trying to forget." The white hair that did not run in the Vance family had run through Evelyn's veins since birth. She had buried it under 40 years of salon appointments and careful maintenance. And then, when her granddaughter was born with the same trait, she did not see inheritance. She saw exposure. She saw the ghost of the child she had given away, staring back at her from Maya's face. Chloe looked at me. "I am so sorry, Nora. I know you did not, Chloe." There was nothing else to say at that table. Arthur picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. He put it on slowly, the way he did everything, deliberate, measured. "I'm going for a drive," he said. He did not look at Evelyn. "Julian, we are leaving too." He turned to me. "Get Maya." I went upstairs. Maya was still sleeping. White curls spread across the white pillow like spun glass. I lifted her gently. She stirred, pressed her face into my neck, and settled. I carried her downstairs. The dining room was emptying. Richard had his coat. Clara was at the front door, keys in hand. Beatrice stood by the china cabinet, frozen, arms wrapped around herself. At the front door, Evelyn stepped in front of Julian. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair, that carefully dyed brown, looked suddenly wrong, like a costume. "Julian, please, do not leave like this. We can talk." Julian stopped, looked at her. "You did not want to talk, Mom. You wanted to perform," Beatrice cried. "Everyone just needs to calm down." Arthur, already at his truck, called back without turning. "Beatrice, if you say one more word, I am calling my lawyer in the morning." The sentence landed on the porch like a gavel. Beatrice went silent. Richard passed her without a word. Clara followed, eyes on the ground. I carried Maya to the car. Julian opened the door. I buckled her into the car seat. She murmured something about her stuffed rabbit. I handed it to her. She grabbed it with both hands and went back to sleep. The house behind us, Evelyn's house, the house she had ruled for 30 years, emptied one person at a time. The dinner she planned to expose me had emptied her own home. We drove in silence for 10 minutes. Maya slept in the back. The highway was empty. Sunday evening, most people were already home. Streetlights passed overhead in slow rhythm, casting amber bands across the dashboard. Julian spoke first. "How long did you know?" "About the test?" 2 weeks. "About Elias?" 8 days. "Why did you not tell me?" I had practiced this answer. Not in words, in logic. I knew the shape of it before I knew the sentences. "Because I needed you to see it for yourself. If I had told you privately, you would have called her. She would have cried and apologized and asked you to keep it in the family. And nothing would have changed." He gripped the steering wheel. Released. Gripped again. "You are saying I would have let her off the hook. I am saying the pattern was 36 years old. I could not break it with a conversation. You needed to see her perform." He was quiet for a mile. Then, "She dyed her hair. For 40 years, the white hair was hers all along. I know." Another mile. "I have a brother, half-brother, in Seattle, Elias." He said the name like he was tasting it, testing its weight. I watched him, his profile against the passing lights, the jaw that Maya had inherited, the shoulders that carried more than just the weight of the day. He was processing, not shutting down, not deflecting, processing. He reached across the center console, found my hand, held it. He did not let go until we pulled into our driveway. He turned off the engine, sat for a moment, looked at me. "Thank you," he said, "for not protecting me from this." I squeezed his hand. That is not what partners do. Monday, Julian called Evelyn. I need time. Do not contact Nora or Maya. For how long? Until I am ready. He hung up, poured coffee, went to work. That was Julian. He processed by doing. Tuesday, Arthur called. He was staying at Richard's house. Told your mother I need space to think, he said. His voice was even, no tremor, no crack. The steadiness of a man who had spent his life ensuring things did not collapse. 34 years of marriage. That is a lot of wire to trace back. Wednesday, Chloe texted me. 3 words. I am sorry. Then a longer message. I should have questioned Mom instead of believing her. I was wrong, and I know an apology does not fix it, but I needed to say it. I replied, thank you for saying that. Thursday, Victoria sent Evelyn a formal letter. Cease and desist regarding any unauthorized genetic testing of Maya Vance. Notice of potential civil action under state privacy statutes. Evelyn called Julian, panicked. Julian told her to read the letter carefully and call a lawyer. Friday evening, Julian sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He had been quiet all week, not withdrawn, just focused, like he was building something in his head. I found him, he said. Elias. He is a landscape architect in Seattle. He has a daughter, 4 years old. He turned the screen toward me, a photo on a firm website. Elias Thorne. Dark hair, same jaw as Julian, same slight crook in the nose. He posted on the DNA platform 3 years ago looking for his birth mother. On the desk behind us, the cream-colored envelope sat where I had placed it when we got home Sunday night. Unsealed. The document that was meant to destroy us had become the document that rebuilt the truth. Julian emailed Elias on Saturday morning. He wrote and deleted it 4 times. I watched from the kitchen doorway with my coffee, saying nothing. He needed to find the words himself. The final version was short. My name is Julian Vance. I believe I am your half-brother. My mother was born in Providence, Rhode Island in 1965. If you are open to talking, I would like that. Elias responded in 2 hours. I have been looking for her for 7 years. I never expected to hear from a brother. They scheduled a video call for that evening. Julian set up his laptop at the kitchen table. I took Maya to the living room to watch her cartoon. At 7:15, I heard Julian say, "Hi, I am Julian." And then a voice I did not recognize. Deeper than Julian's, steadier. "Hi, Julian. I am Elias." I stayed in the living room, but I could hear them. And after 20 minutes, I heard Julian cry. Not the quiet kind. The kind that comes from deep in the chest, from a place most men spend their lives pretending does not exist. I stood in the kitchen doorway. On the screen, Elias was crying too. Same jaw, same eyes. 36 years apart, and they looked like 2 versions of the same blueprint. Does she know? Elias asked. My birth mother? Julian wiped his face. She knows. It did not go well. I do not want to cause problems. I just wanted to know where I came from. Julian, you are not causing problems, Elias said. You are not the one who lied. Maya tugged my hand. Mommy, why is Daddy sad? I picked her up. He is not sad, baby. He is meeting someone new. 2 weeks later, Evelyn came to our door. Unannounced. The old pattern. Same side entrance, same assumption that her presence was always welcome, except now the side door was locked. I had changed the code. She knocked. I opened the front door. She stood on the step in a gray cardigan, eyes rimmed red, looking 10 years older than the woman who had slid an envelope across the table with the confidence of someone who believed she was saving her family. I need to explain, she said. I was young. My parents made me give him up. I carried this guilt for decades. Julian appeared behind me. Then you should have dealt with it honestly. Instead, you projected it onto my wife and my daughter. I was trying to protect. You were not protecting anyone, Mom. You were protecting your secret. Evelyn looked at me. Nora, please. I am asking for a chance. I considered her for a long moment. This woman who had spent 7 years measuring me, cataloging my flaws, salting the ground between me and her family. This woman who had stolen my daughter's DNA. This woman who had planned a public execution at her own dinner table and called it love. Evelyn, you are welcome to have a relationship with Maya. She loves you. We would not take that from her. Hope flickered in her eyes. But it will be on our terms, on our schedule, and you will never be alone with her again. The hope dimmed, but it did not die. She nodded. Those are the terms, I said. She did not argue. For the first time in 7 years, maybe for the first time in her life, Evelyn Vance did not argue. She stepped off the porch, walked to her car, and drove away. Arthur called Julian on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the dinner. Been at Richard's since that night, he said. First time in my life I have slept under another man's roof. You up? I have been seeing a counselor. Do not laugh. I am not laughing. My guy, Dr. Aris. He says I need to figure out what I can live with and what I cannot. Arthur paused. The line was quiet except for the sound of wind. He was probably outside, standing in Richard's yard. I can live with a mistake she made at 25. People make mistakes. Lord knows I have. But I cannot live with 36 years of silence. That is not a mistake. That is a decision made every single day. Julian did not respond. Sometimes silence is the kindest thing a son can offer. The following Saturday, Arthur drove to our house. He brought a toy truck he had made in Richard's garage, hand-sanded, painted red, with wooden wheels that actually turned. For my granddaughter, he said at the door. Maya saw him from the hallway. She ran. Papa Arthur! He scooped her up and she pressed her face into his flannel collar, her white curls against his plaid shirt. He held her for a long time. Then he looked at Julian. She looks like your mother did at this age, you know, before your mother started dyeing it. Julian nodded. I know. Arthur set Maya down. She rolled the truck across the porch, making engine sounds. He watched her with the expression of a man who had just rewired his entire understanding of the past, tracing every connection back to its source, finding shorts and dead ends, and deciding which circuits were still worth keeping. 6 months later, Julian flew to Seattle and met Elias in person. They sat in a diner for 4 hours, 2 men with the same jaw, the same slightly crooked nose, 36 years of distance between them. Elias brought his wife, Sarah, and their daughter, Lily. Julian brought photos of Maya. In August, Elias and his family visited Rhode Island. Lily and Maya played in our backyard while Julian and Elias sat on the porch, drinking iced tea and watching their daughters chase each other through the sprinkler. I stood in the kitchen window and watched them, 2 brothers finding each other in the middle of their lives. Evelyn and Arthur went to couples therapy. Arthur moved back home after 2 months, but he set conditions. Honesty. Full disclosure. No more locked drawers. No more buried histories. Evelyn agreed. She stopped dyeing her hair. It came in silver white now, with traces of platinum at the temples, the ghost of the girl she had tried to erase. Chloe apologized formally in writing. She mailed a letter, handwritten, 3 pages, to both me and Julian. It was the most honest thing she had ever produced. The relationship was rebuilding slowly, the way you rebuild anything worth keeping, one honest conversation at a time. Aunt Beatrice was not invited to Thanksgiving. Nobody discussed it. The absence spoke clearly enough. At work, I helped a 5-year-old girl take her first steps in new leg braces. She grabbed my hands, pushed off, and stood for 3 seconds before sitting back down. Her mother sobbed. I wrote in my notes, patient stood unsupported for 3 seconds. Progress within expected range. Some things take time, but they come. The cream-colored envelope sits in a drawer in my desk. I never threw it away. Not because I need it, but because it reminds me that sometimes the weapon someone builds to destroy you is the exact same weapon that sets you free. Here's what I know now. The people who try hardest to expose your secrets are usually the ones with the biggest secrets of their own. And the truth, the real truth, does not need a stage or an audience or an envelope slid across a dinner table. It just needs time. That is my NCU story. A DNA test, a dinner table, and a secret that was 36 years old. If this reminded you to trust yourself when everyone else doubts you, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here.